Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another of our Wednesday webinars, also called Webinar Wednesday. It's great to be with you today. I'm Kelly Bearden. I am the host of today's webinar, and I'm with the CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. And first of all, thanks to many of you who have been along for the entire ride and have been along partially. I thank you. We have a lot of stuff to go through, a lot of changes that keep evolving with this darn coronavirus. So let's get on with the show. First of all, if you need to actually ask a question, and we're going to have time for question and answers afterwards, please go to the question box and put it in there. We'll try to leave ample time for question. Hold on a second. Sorry, I had to change that. So a little time for questions, a little time for answers, and a few other things that are going on. So please do go there and ask questions and leave any comments that you might have in the chat box. So the chat box is open, and let's get going. So as you probably know, we're part of America's SBDCs, a nationwide program that started back in 1980 to provide technical assistance to small businesses. An SBDC has been in Bakersfield since 1991, and we've been providing services out of CSUB, Cal State Bakersfield, since 2010. So we're part of a region which encompasses the Central California region, which is the 14 counties in the central part of the state, which aligns us with the Fresno SBA district office. And we cover all of Kern, Inyo, and Mono counties. You've heard me refer to it as our little Italy without the heel. And so those are the three counties we're responsible for. There are other SBDC locations throughout the Central California region, and they're located in Clovis and in Modesto, Merced, in Salinas, and also in San Luis Obispo. So do reach out if you want to, if you need some consulting work or some training opportunities. A lot of different events. We do a lot of different things throughout our region. So please, if you need assistance, go to the SBDC. So you might be aware of our sponsors. We have a number of sponsors. The SBDC program is sponsored nationally by the U.S. Small Business Administration, but we have several other partners that help us along the way. Locally, we have support of Kern County, and we're an economic development partner with the county. Mid-State Development Corporation, the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, also known as GoBiz. We work out of our School of Business and Public Administration at CSUB. So the School of Business and Public Administration, a great resource for us, and also the Blue Tech Valley Project, which is an innovation and technology project out of CSU Fresno. So what are we going to do today? What are we going over? Today, it's July 1st, and it is hard to believe, isn't it? Halfway through this year already. A year that a lot of people really, it's not going to be one of their favorites. Starting to see some of the t-shirts around that are reflecting people's mood about how they feel about 2020. And so today we're going to get into a little bit of the PPE issues. And it didn't take long for me to misspeak on the PPE, which is the private protection equipment for employees and also potentially for customers of your business. So the Kern Recovers program begins today on July 1, and we're going to go through the details of the PPEs in all of Kern, Inyo, and Mono counties that we know right now. We're going to talk about what's next for that $130 billion that we thought was going to be left over as of today for the PPP program, but we'll get into a little bit more of that, as we will on managing your PPP. We'll have a little bit on EIDL, and also the forgiveness form will make its appearance. We'll jump in briefly into the spreadsheet. We'll take your questions, and we'll start with a poll. So let's start with that poll today, get the poll rolling. And the first poll is going to be kind of a little bit of our theme for the early part of the webinar today. And the poll question that I'm going to launch right now is, according to published reports today, what percentage of the US population has reopened or halted, or excuse me, has seen a reopening halted or reversed. So what percentage of the population has seen a reopening that has been halted or reversed by the virus that's jumping out right now? And this is a national, just the best guess. We have 20, 30, 40, and 50%. And have the coronavirus, as you know, blowing up in Florida and Texas, Arizona, and California. It's ripping in our San Joaquin Valley. So give you another couple of instances to guess on our whimsical question of the day, but it's relevant. The percentage of the US population that has seen reopening halted or actually reversed. And we're going to end the poll right now and share the results with you. And the results are actually 33% spread out very evenly between 20, 40, and 50 as well, but 33% is the one that has 33% of the vote. But unfortunately, it's actually 40%. 40% of the population now in the US has seen their business have to be halted or actually in reverse since the opening that started a little while back. So our first question is done. Let's go to poll question number 2. And a little bit more appropriate with the forgiveness in covered periods of 8 and 24 weeks we'll get into, and let's launch this poll. And it's going to be, what is the percentage of your PPP is already spent? Approximately, is it less than 25? Is it 26 to 50, 51 to 75, 76 to 99, or you are 100% spent? So this is going to be really helpful in kind of guiding a few things down the road. It looks like 75 to 99 is the clear-cut leader right now. We'll give you a few more opportunities to get in. Also, many of you are 100% spent, and how many of you are half to 3/4 spent? So with about 62% of you voted, I'm sure some of you don't have the PPP, but let's end the poll right now and show the results. And our results, the majority, 38%, are between 3/4 and 100% spent. And then it's half to 3/4 is another 26%. 1 in 5, 20% are already fully spent on the PPP. And the lower ends are far less represented. Okay, that's good to know. Very valuable. So thank you for voting. Thank you for participating. And we're going to stop that right now and move on. So let's talk a little bit about the Kern Recovers PPE distribution. Boy, we just need one more PP acronym right now. Maybe a PPZ, that'd be nice. So we've talked about the program now the last couple of weeks, and in addition to the loan program, there's a PPE distribution for small businesses, and it's the goal of supporting 5,000 small businesses as they have reopened, and that they have 200 or fewer employees, and a variety of different free PPEs are available for them to use in their business. And they include masks, sanitizers, gloves, and others. They're going to be distributed through the county libraries and also the Employment Training Resource Centers, or ETR, that are located as part of America's Job Center countywide. So initially, there's $5 million in the 2-month program that begins today, and the program may be able to be expanded. So how do you get some of that PPE, you might ask? Well, this is how you do it. The business provides the county with the following information. You're going to need to either online or a telephone number. And what we'll do is we'll put that information in this entire sheet that we're going over right now. We'll put it in the attachment information that we'll send out in the email either tomorrow or early Friday. So with that, we have a number of information that you're going to need to provide. You can either call or email the legal information of your business. If you have an employer identification number or a taxpayer ID number, you're going to need to provide it along with an address, an email, and also a phone number. So the demographic information is the type of business, the number of employees, and the number of employees at specific location that is being supplied. So maybe your business has a location outside of Kern County, or maybe it has multiple locations. The one that is actually being supplied need the number of employees, which oftentimes might be the same. The amount of PPE requested for a 2-week period, up to a 2-week period, is available. And then there's scheduling information such as the name of the employee who will pick up at the library or the ETR facility the supplies. So after the order is taken by the county, the order will be processed. The county will contact you and schedule a PPE pickup. The county contacts the businesses using a lot of the online information to confirm employee indicated for PE is an employee of the business. So there's a lot of due diligence that goes on to make sure that, that it's falling into the right hands of the business and the right business owners. So then the county will provide a scheduled date and pickup, which will be within 30 days, and the amount of the PPE to be supplied to help them. So then lastly, the pickup process is the county actually, or excuse me, the business will pick up the PPE at its scheduled and designated time. The person must be the one scheduled for the delivery that was cleared and vetted in advance. And they must show valid identification or driver's license for confirmation of their identity. And lastly, the employee, the individual picking it up, will need to sign a receipt acknowledging accepting the PPE and the requirements that go along with that, including that all used exclusively within their business operations in Kern County, and the excess must be returned to the county. So as we see surges throughout, I think the San Joaquin Valley, it's, I think, important to know that the PPEs are available and probably needed more so now than ever. And the county has a program to get the vital PPE for businesses that either can't find them, can't locate them, or can't afford them during this time, get them into the business to help safeguard their employees and also their customers when appropriate. So we also cover Mono and Inyo counties, and I just wanted to give you an update on what is going on in the Eastern Sierra with regard to PPEs. I know that Mono County is currently distributing PPE, and they're doing it through chambers of commerce throughout the county. And throughout the county, I believe there are 5 chambers in Mammoth Lakes, in June Lakes, in Bridgeport, Lee Vining, and then there's the North Mono Chamber that covers the far northern part before you go into Nevada in northern Mono County, the area also known as the Antelope Valley. And yes, that is true for you East Kern and Bakersfield residents. There are 2 Antelope Valleys. So for distribution inside of Inyo County, I'm not positive exactly what is going on. I know that they have been in contact. I would follow the Bishop Chamber of Commerce. It could be up and going now. It could be up and going soon. But what we're seeing is what I'm checking with, and in other areas, also check with your local SBDCs, chambers, or county governments to see if programs exist otherwise. As far as then the Eastern Sierra update, in talking with some of the local businesses, some of the local community and business leaders up in Mono County and in Inyo County, there seems to be an extraordinary amount of traffic for people wanting to get out of town. And beautiful place, and the businesses are very happy. But, like it's true with all of us, I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and I have done this process. If you have a symptom, go get checked. And I noticed that the actual COVID testing is actually taking a lot longer than it did 2 weeks ago, which is not a good sign from my perspective. But people are wanting to get out and about and are traveling to the Eastern Sierra and other places, and having the PPEs in businesses and actually using that helps all of our businesses. The last thing we need is to go through a major blow up right now and have another major setback to our small businesses not only in our 3-county area, but throughout Central California. So please, we're in this together. So some of the loan programs as far as Kern Recovers goes, you might recall it's a program that a lot of people say is similar to the PPP program. And, you know, so what it does is it works with actually 4 banks, as we've mentioned, Altawan Credit Union, Mission, Valley Strong, and Valley Republic Bank from the Kern Recovers website. My last update I got on the website was yesterday. We don't have time to go there today. And plus, if you have questions regarding the Kern PPE that are very specific and Kern Recoveries, next week our guest will be Jim Service from the county to talk about both. So we'll leave that for next week. But last I saw it was right around or maybe even over $10 million with, it seems like almost close to 400 businesses that have actually applied and received funding. Remember, the benefit of the Kern Recovers program is they use the multiplier of 4x instead of 2.5 times payroll for a given month, which can actually provide more resources up to $75,000. And also, it is for a third of it is for working capital. We have a third of it also for employees and payroll, and a third of it for other expenses, similar type PPP expenses. Right now, the last I have not heard at this point that they are opening the actual PPP, the Kern Recovers version of that, for those that have received the actual payroll protection program loan. So right now it is both non-essential and essential businesses that did not get in initially, but keep checking back if you have a PPP loan about what the requirements, and maybe we'll find that out next week, as there probably won't be much movement on that for the next week, would be my guess. So in our particular area, we have other local loan programs, and our other local loan programs actually slide, I have a slide error. I have a slide error here, but it basically, that's on the Kern Recovers program, but also I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in other jurisdictions, and mainly in Mono and Inyo counties. In Mono County right now, they are having a program set up that will be for the town of Mammoth Lakes, and it appears to be about $300,000 in funds. We'll talk about it more next week. I do not believe it is open yet. And there's a possibility that there will also be a local loan fund that's of similar forgiveness nature for small business loans to communities such as Mono County and others. So, you know, I think it's always good if you're outside of Kern, Inyo, and Mono to check with your local SBDC to see if there is a local program, especially since we're now starting to see, according to the poll today, many of you are expending your PPP money. Hopefully there's an EIDL loan behind that to cover you through the next period of issues and problems that might be out there. So keep in mind that there are going to be good programs to continue to assist you and open up, and we'll bring them to you when we hear them. Okay, on to EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. There's a good opportunity tomorrow if you have been either denied or you want to actually increase the amount of your disaster loan, to attend the SBA Fresno District Office, and along with the SBA Office of Disaster Assistance from Citrus Heights, California, on Thursday, tomorrow at 11 a.m. and learn more about reconsiderations. You know, at the SBDC, we've talked to numerous individuals that have had problems or have been initially rejected, and there could be opportunities in order to get that decline actually reversed. We could also see those that received an EIDL actually go through a process to see if there are opportunities to increase that particular EIDL loan. Now, I wouldn't anticipate anything happening, at least at this time, that would increase the EIDL over the current level that it's at now, which is $150,000. So if you have an idle that's 150,000 or greater, I do not believe, but you might want to check with them tomorrow to see if anything has changed over the last week or two. So some of the things, and we covered a lot of these last week, that were some of the declines that you're getting, and some of those are in unverified information. And it could be as simple as having a new business entity in the last a few months before the virus hit, and that could actually occur from maybe changing from a sole proprietorship to an LLC or S corporation, which are fairly common. And also it could be a variety of other factors. But I believe there's a lot of them. I would, if you want to have a reconsideration for your idle for a decline or for a larger amount, I would attend tomorrow and I would put a question in the question box early. So you can go to the Fresno District office, and that's the Fresno District SBA office, and you can find the information on how to join the conference tomorrow. If you have a question that's more related to, what is the status of my particular idle, you might first try the 800 number. We've posted this throughout probably since about week 1. 800-659-2955, or email with your application number to disastercustomerservice@sba.gov. So EIDL is still open. They're still accepting loans for both agricultural businesses and non-agricultural businesses. So it is open. It's an easy process. The EIDL loan application process has never been easier. At least I don't think so. The portal is something you can jump in and get out of a little bit. Anticipate by the sheer volume of activity that SBA has in underwriting EIDL loans right now. Anticipate a lengthy time delay, but at least get in and get in the queue and get going if you haven't done so already. Okay, it's Wednesday, so obviously there's breaking news on the PPP, and while it's not official, there was a Senate bill that was, I believe, passed last night to extend the application process for PPP for an additional 5 weeks. Those 5 weeks would end on August the 8th. It still has to go to the House and it still has to be signed by the president, but it seems to have widespread support given the fact that there is money left over in the PPP program. And a lot of the ones that they're seeing now, I would anticipate to be smaller and, smaller type loans that are maybe in underserved rural and other communities that are just getting the word out and getting the news. It could also be individuals that did not want to apply because initially they didn't feel comfortable with the forgiveness of the PPP. And there has been a lot of guidance in the last couple of weeks and new law changes that have really made that maybe more attractive to those that did not apply and receive a PPP loan. So as of Monday, it's funny, I have as of Monday and as of Tuesday, but let's go with as of Monday, has approved 4.8 million loans through the PPP program, worth nearly $520 billion. So that leaves left about $140 billion, or give or plus or minus. So we did mention this last week on the release of public information for anybody who received a PPP loan of $150,000. I threw that in there again just in case anybody missed last week, but also 150 is really becoming a common number in these two programs. We have the idle limit now at 150. We have public release on 150. So 150 is really kind of being a consensus number for a number of things that we'll even get into in a minute. So one thing is there was the guidance that came out last Wednesday. We're still expecting a little bit more guidance. Still some questions regarding the safe harbor. And thanks to Lou for pointing out some things to me. But as far as new SBA interim final guidelines, nothing this week. It's been kind of the rule, or at least it's been the trend for SBA to release that midweek and then actually publish the final rule on Friday afternoon. And we'll do a little bit more on our PPP forgiveness implementation and analysis based on what we learned breaking news last week. We'll have a little bit more on that this week. So as I mentioned, the 150 number, there was other developments. There was legislation that I believe was introduced yesterday as well. And it has bipartisan support. And again, we see the 150 number, $150,000. And a bill was introduced that would forgive basically all PPP loans that are $150,000 and under. Gaining the bipartisan support, I think, is a big deal. So having that and being able to, that would actually forgive 85% of all PPP loans. But in that same vein, it would only forgive 26% of the total program dollars that were spent on the program. So to me, it seems like, well, to me, it seems like a no-brainer, but we'll see. Could be part of the political process that evolves with that extra money in our next round of stimulus that is very likely to come, at least in my opinion. And again, 150 and under on PPP loans, you would be able to forgive 85% of all loans and only forgive 26% of the program dollars. And I remember we had a poll a few weeks ago. There are a lot of you that have the 150 and do not qualify and over on this particular webinar. So that's still an issue for you, and we'll still continue to seek the final regulations and final rules. The safe harbor opened up a lot, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So what are some of the other developments that I thought were going to be post-PPP? Well, it was published this week that aides for Senator Marco Rubio, who happens to be the chairman of the Senate Small Business Committee, identified that its bipartisan task force is currently working toward a final agreement to implement the next steps to support small business. So it seems like there is a consensus, bipartisan consensus in Washington that the 130 and 140, whatever's left after the next 5 weeks, if that goes through, say it's 125, is going to be implemented in the next phase. And maybe the 5 weeks is good because maybe it gives, you know, the policymakers time to assess what's going on now with some of the ramp ups in coronavirus cases and some of the other things that are going on with the pandemic to make the best decisions for the remaining 125 billion, excuse me. So on breaking news that we had 3 weeks ago, before that very same Senate Small Business Committee, the Treasury Secretary came on and said he believed that there would be another round of legislation and it was going to be needed to pump more money into the economy, but such efforts should be carefully targeted. At that time, he did mention hospitality industries might be targeted, such as hotels, restaurants, and bars, and others that are suffering greatly because of this particular pandemic. So that kind of gives us a little bit of direction of where the guidance might come from. So I guess we'll see. So just a little recap of the last couple of weeks, since there has been so much news and so much change with the PPP Flexibility Act that was implemented, passed by both houses and signed by the president, implemented, and actually then some of the implications it had on the actual forgiveness aspect of this. So let's start with one thing that I don't think I mentioned enough, and that is your lender is going to be key in the forgiveness process, and it's going to be essential to follow their guidance. Remember, there are over 5,000 lenders that people used across the country. Many used our smaller community banks, the same ones that are actually participating in the current recoveries. Use some of the banking, their existing banking relationships with larger banks. FinTech was widely represented through a variety of different financial technologies. We had nonprofit lenders such as community financial investment corporations, or CDAFIs. And also, and those include such as the Opportunity Fund and others. So we had several of them, several different types of lenders that are involved in this forgiveness process. And how they implement that process is going to be unique and different, and it's going to be timely. So with the lender being the key in the process, remember that the lenders receive a 5% fee for actually doing this. And their key is to, perfect the process from SBA so that they get their 5%. And in that process is obviously all the rules and guidance. And a lot of these rules and guidance that we talk about over the last 3 weeks are really geared toward lenders, and lenders for using that in their guidance in order to, under the existing laws and rules and regulations, including the interim final rules, the IFR, to actually implement this to perfect their guarantee on the particular loan they made to you. So the reason I say that is there's going to be different processes. There could be manual processes. I would expect all fintechs to have an online process, and I expect most lenders to have an online process that you follow. As this is developing, it's really the lender that you take your forgiveness application to, and the lender is going to be the one that signs off on it. The only way I would believe it comes back through SBA is if there is an audit of the particular institution, if there's an audit of the particular borrower. So the lender is going to be key. So follow their guidelines and try to stay in touch either online or locally with your particular lender or banker and find out exactly what their process is going to be. So there are some managing aspects of this that still need to occur. And really the poll today really helped me kind of establish where most of you are in the spending down of your particular, let's say the spending down of your grants that you're receiving, if they are 100% guaranteed and 100% forgiven. So you still have the option to calculate between the 8 or 24-week payroll covered period. Now that is true for those that were initiated before June 5th. If you have a PPP after June 5th, you must implement the 24-week period. But we had some really good news last week that came out that said you can actually file early or when your money is spent. But for managing that, you really need to align with your borrower's payroll and also your other expenses that you have. So in order to, and there's still the full-time options, the full-time bringing back the same number of employees, but there's a little more flexibility in doing that with the safe harbor for many businesses. The safe harbor won't protect all businesses because you will have to be impacted, and we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. The other thing that's important is to recall that it did increase the maximum for owner salaries in all businesses to $20,833. Recall it was previously $15,000, maybe $845. So it was about $15,845, maybe $345. And how soon we forget. And for employees, it's a $46,000 number, and you need to actually have that for obtaining 60% forgiveness. So there's borrower-friendly implementation of some of the statutes for 1231 that we were using initially, and that is a written offer to rehire workers. That is declined by that. So we got in the rules that without using the safeguard, going through the traditional amounts of replacing your employees, you could actually rehire the ones that you have and then also get written offers. And then of course, the other big one was reducing the payroll amount to 60% from 75%. So the nice thing is that, as I had mentioned, that you can actually now file forgiveness at any time. You don't need to wait till the conclusion of your 8 or 24-week period. It can move the deadline to as late as 12/31/20, and that might work for a lot of businesses that either are getting in late or have had to shut down once, or as I'm hearing from too many of our clients are shutting down again. Unforgiven portion can be amortized over 5 years. If it was before June 5th, you will need lender approval, and that is another good reason to stay with your particular lender. You know, too much of what I tend to talk about is about using all of your PPP and having it 100% forgiven. And where I think many, or maybe even most of you, would prefer that option, for some, it might be better to carry over a part and amortize it over 5 years for other parts of your business. So whereas the payroll is just simply not going to come back, or if it is extending out longer, your closure, and you need those for other purposes, you need to spend that money for other purposes, then actually getting the 5-year amortization, I think, is crucial over the 2 years that you will be getting with loans that were made through the PPP process before June 5th. We mentioned that the payroll tax deferrals are now permitted for PPP. Remember, this is just a deferral. All you're doing is offsetting this liability until parts of 2021 and I believe 22 that will pay those hopefully when your sales and cash flow come back. It is still a deferral, but you are able to basically retain the amounts that you would have paid in payroll taxes, be it federal income tax and also federal Social Security and Medicare. So the forgiveness forms, we came back and just recapping this, we have a 5-page version, and we also have the easy application, which is 3 pages. It'll be next week when we really pull through a major analysis on this and get into really a lot of what's going on there. But keep checking with your lender. Some of them might require you to use one form or another, given based on your loan size and other factors. We determined a few weeks ago that you can get 60%. If you get under the 60% payroll level, you can still get partial forgiveness. So it would be a sliding scale. And also the incurred or paid rule implies within your 24-week period, which is also your 8-week period, to where it can be incurred, your payroll can actually happen before your 8-week period starts. And you can actually manage that to maybe bring in an 8-week period instead of a 24 if you prefer. So again, on managing the safe harbor, and I just believe we need more guidance on the safe harbor. I think it helped by identifying it, but essentially what it came out and said was, and again, I tend to take a more loose definition that is the intent of the program. And the intent of the program, I don't think, is to punish businesses that are not able to get back to capacity, especially with surges going on, particularly in our areas. But, you know, the document, it said you need to document an inability to return the same level of business activity as such business was on 2/15/20. So the documentation process can be up for definition and may not. But really, this really was one of the new interim rules from last week that really, I think, really helps a lot of individuals where they're able to actually go in to submit the loan forgiveness application anytime before the maturity date of the loan. And I know some of you, many of you are at 100% and probably wanting to move on and get this off your balance sheet. You're wanting to get on with the process of it being over. And you're also looking at potentially maybe even using some of the loan proceeds that aren't covered at this time and carrying them over into the loan amount that you could use for other areas and other parts. So again, it's still a management process based on your own business and your own particular needs. If your needs get you to the covered part of 60% and you use the other amount for the required expenditures, then you should be fine. So the direction that we're getting is from on the safe harbor. There's your same level of business activity, and it's due to compliance with requirements established or guidance issued by these three organizations. It would be your Center for Disease Control, OSHA, and also the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Those on the federal level, I believe if you have local conditions where you have local shutdowns and you have businesses that aren't able to operate under local or state law, that those will be actually implemented into the safe harbor as well. So again, our role in the SBDC, with the SBDC, is to continue to help you on Kern Recovers with loans and PPPs, PPEs, and also the business funding programs that are going to be coming available and business options that are available down the road. And that could be the stimulus, and it could be also providing information on some of the business programs and stimulus. I did have another slide that I don't know what happened. Maybe I skipped it accidentally, but it was on another potential, and I'm going to shoot off the top of my head on this, but it was for another potential round. And I believe this was introduced by Senate Democrats, where they actually will have a second phase of the PPP, but it will be limited to those that have 100 businesses or less, and also show a 50% reduction in gross revenues over the time period. And again, this is all going to be negotiated between both political parties. There's a resolution, as one of my favorite bankers would say, there's a deal in there somewhere to get more money out to small business, and it's going to happen. So we'll just keep plugging along until we get that information. The SBDC can help you with your applications for as far as forgiveness. We can also assist with business continuity planning, as you saw with Melanie Saya, who was on a few weeks ago, and joined us with the live plan portion, cash flow forecasting, also something you might want to reconsider, and also other opportunities that are out there. Okay, let's change over here to a little PPP by the numbers, as we like to call it. And this isn't a very updated from last week's 15, but there's a couple of things that I want to go through, and I want to identify as maybe managerial opportunities to where you're managing your PPP funds to their fullest. So just an example, since we'll be using this example again, it is the Kelly Grill LLC. This was their PPP application process. And I think it's always important to go back to your application process. There was an exclusion of $100,000 or more paid to one of their employees or owners. And so long story short, $100,000 loan, 60,000 of it is the payroll number we need to get to. Kelly's good friend, Fred, did not apply originally and had a lot of the same numbers, except, you know, he had a bar, he had Fred's Bar and Grill, had a little bit better profit margins and made a little bit more of a net income at the end, which is understandable. And what we did was we used this example last week to show where the the Kern Recovers program, rather than the PPP program, might be the best way to go for this particular borrower. And it shows a larger amount that can be used and more resources. We still get questions on self-employed individuals, and this example will work, I believe, for independent contractors and others. It shows the revenue for mom and pop, their grill, and basically with no employees, but it does show that they have a net income of $100,000, which is the maximum then that they can pull in, and their PPP loan was for $20,833, which we've now learned through guidance in the last couple of weeks that that entire amount is now forgivable. So I have some questions out there that have come in about can I use health insurance and can I use other aspects for being a self-employed individual with only one, or excuse me, they're the only employee of the business. And if it was me, what I would do is I would just take a routinely draw of the amount of your PPP, because it is now 100% forgivable the amount of salary that you pay yourself up to the $20,833. So it is really kind of easy and clean where you can take 4 or 6 or weekly draws or whatever, spread it out over the time you do need to spread it over the time from when it opens and not exceed the weekly amount. So you need to follow that guideline. And that would be something we'll go over in just a second. So let's do that now. So here would be the guideline that I'm referring to is we have an individual here that is reaching the max amount, or excuse me, that was the max amount before it increased from 15,385 to 20,000. But this was mostly spent before the regulation came out. So you need to stay within that weekly amount from when your covered period starts to the end. So that is the cleanest, easiest way for sole proprietors to pay it. Going back to this forecast, and again, this will be available. We'll send it out again this week. I don't think we updated it last week. But just a couple of more things to reiterate and to go over. Again, your start date, you can elect the 24 weeks, which we've done here. And you can also elect to actually, you're electing now down to 60%, which really is an election. But so let me give you an example of something that I saw while working through this spreadsheet. And one of the things that came up was when I got into the individual employees down here for the covered period, what I started to see was, a little bit of, I kind of, on my forecast, I kind of drug out the payments here. And I could be claiming actual payroll. And my intent behind this, from a managerial perspective, was that I had cash flow coming in from the grill business. So I was able to then subsidize for a longer period of time my employees with the PPP. So I could have taken more up front and then banked the cash flow and rolled it out. But one of the things you have to consider in your business now is if there's an opportunity my business might close again, is to maybe potentially spend this early. Now, you probably would be covered by the safeguard, the safe haven of the encompassing you're closed and you have to be closed, and you get that exemption that cover the full-time and salary exemption. But you might recall on my forgiveness, I wanted to actually look into actually completing it both ways. So by then getting back to using that into my actual, so I had a forecast and now I have an actual, and moving those numbers around. And I also have the forgiveness FTE application. So the first rule that came out was that I could actually count people who did not come back to work. And so I counted a number of people that came back because of unemployment. Another person found full-time employment, and another person wanted to stay on unemployment, which I am now required to report to the state unemployment agency. So EDD would need to be notified on that. So I wanted to reach my full-time equivalent without the safe harbor, and I did that by bringing back 14 people. Now, I don't think you really need to use 8 of the 24 weeks, but I am not positive on the last week that you actually have your PPP open. And going back to my forecast, that would be week 14, 7/27. So I'm not positive if I use that first method. There's the optional method that I believe about everybody's going to be covered that has this situation with the safe harbor. But, I might want to be safe, and I might want to use some more of my money earlier in my 24-week covered period, maybe around week 11, and then be able to have all my employees and be covered. Ooh, give me some water. Okay, so that is one of the reasons why you might want to manage it a little bit quicker, your payments, if you're shut down and you have fear of the safe harbor not protecting you. So we looked also at this. Also, I'll include this week the 8-week version. It's 1250. We try to jump to questions now. So here's the 8-week version for those of you that want to do it over the 8-week, remember to set your origination date. You'll need to adjust the date here. The individual pay cap on a weekly basis being now the 24,833 may change there. So there's the form. Hopefully planning next week to have more information to where we could jump back into the actual forgiveness form and go through implementing maybe a change right then of using the EZ method and the larger method. So that'll be on tap for next week. Okay, let's get to your questions. So let me go back here and come over here. And go back over to here and try to pull some questions. Okay, questions. I have some from last week. And let me pull these in, or you've sent in earlier this week. So let me try to get to these first. I'm fine, thank you. This individual received a PPP for around 100,000 and an EIDL advance of 10,000. They did lose one employee, as we found out and discussed a while ago. They're moving closer to their hometown, but they're filling the position, so you can rehire new individuals that will count. We think it needs to be at that same time, but we'll see with more guidance. So the origination date is the origination sign date is June 1st. They haven't deposited the funds. What you'll want to do is you'll want to use the June 1st date, and you'll want to use the 24-week period, most likely. You do have the option of using the 8-week there. So it's going to be 60% either way. And for payroll, the question is, what is considered for payroll? And for payroll, it's going to be the gross pay. On the sheet, you also see some other aspects that are included, and those are going to include state taxes and health insurance for employees that were in place, and also potentially some retirement. Can you pay hazard and pay? Yes, you can pay hazard pay. And you can pick between either of the covered periods. When you apply for the forgiveness, 100,000 and 10,000 equals 110,000. You still will have the $10,000 that will not be forgiven. EIDL advances for individuals that receive PPPs will not be forgiven, so please recall that. And utility bills that you can pay, we're finding that that's a little broader than we anticipated. It's going to be for your fixed office place, including electrical, gas, and a few others, sewer, water, etc., but also potentially could include gasoline for potential vehicles. Self-employed with no employees, into the week, they started their PPP on May 5th. They can use the 8-week if you'd like. No employees. I would just, rather than using any other type, the question is, can I use other type of expenses? And I would just probably, in my example that I used, use that particular salary that's available there, where you can pay yourself and get 100% forgiveness. So apparently I have to stop the share to get into the question box, but here goes. Okay. I want to return my EIDL. How and where do I send it back? I think that that is a perfectly good question for the SBA email number, or also the toll-free 800 number. So if you want to return your EIDL, and I always tell people to, think twice about it. You can actually, execute the EIDL and send it back and pay it back early, and you're not out very much as far as interest. But once you've returned an EIDL, once you've rejected it, you will not be able to access EIDL. You then have proven to SBA that there are other resources available which are part of the EIDL loan, and you don't need the money. So I just try to recommend that people make sure you absolutely are sure you're not going to need it. And you might know that better than I. So you would actually want to follow a process that SBA provides to you The SBA webinar would be a good place to go tomorrow for idle reconsiderations, and they would be able to help you with how to send SBA idle money back. Have I heard anything about the IRS tax deadline being extended beyond 7/15? I heard they were considering it. I believe that it did not happen. I'm not 100% positive on that, but I do not believe that they extended it. Taxes are due 2 weeks from today. Is idle program still restricted to ag businesses? And you probably heard my answer to that earlier. Other regular businesses can apply as well. And we really encourage, I know when Keith Bryce has joined us on the program, he has been a strong advocate of idle as being really an excellent program because of the short life of the PPP. And the idle can cover you for a much longer period of time if that happens. So we do encourage you to apply for an idle loan, and it is available to all ag and other related businesses. So all small businesses that actually meet the requirements, and look at the requirements because it is a different requirement than PPP. If you meet the requirements, yes, you can apply. CAM charges, you know, those wonderful tenant charges that a lot of people who rent get is billed separately from my rent. Can I use PPP to cover CAM charges under utilities? I would believe you'd be able to cover them under rent because it is locked up into your rental agreement, into your lease. If you have a lease that specifies you pay a certain amount for rent and a certain amount for other uses of the property, I think CAM charges would classify under rent. Okay, so I did not apply for a PPP. I did apply for an idle, but I don't understand how it's calculated. We're a nonprofit where most positions are not paid. The idle will be different than that. The idle is going to go off of gross revenue, and I believe, and don't quote me on this, there's so much information to recall, that idles are available for 501c3s and potentially other nonprofits, but it really goes kind of off your revenue, and your gross profit is the determination factor there. If you're in Kern County, I would suggest looking into the Kern Recovers, which is a little broader definition than the PPP was for nonprofits as well. I hope that answered your question. My lender tells me that 60% now applies to spending 60% of funds. That would be 60% of your total amount for payroll. So the 60% number applies to spending 60%, reaching that 60% threshold. So I'm not totally 60% of spending all funds. I'm not sure, but 60% of payroll should cover you there, with 40% for other uses. And many other people are just using it for payroll because you have the 24-week period of time now for payroll. And it is the intent of the program, and also really covers you a lot easier. What are the dates and deadlines for receiving a PPP loan, and how that aligns with an 8 and 24-week covered period? Good question. The date of when you receive the loan is when it is actually received by you. If you have it mailed to you, though, I would only anticipate a day or two. And actually with 24 weeks, it's not even important. I would go off of the distribution of when it's distributed by your bank and they notify you that it's coming, or the date on the check. If you received it electronically, I would consider that, since they're putting it into your account, to be that same very day. And then you can elect a 8-week period if you're before June 5th. If it's after June 5th, you have to acknowledge the 24-week covered period. So I hope that answers both of those questions. Maximum for employee and owners. Can you use the full max of $20,833 for owners and $46,640 for employees? My answer to that would be yes. Those are the limits that you can use. The only question I would have here is that If you don't qualify under the safe harbor exemption for returning all your employees back to work, if your employees were originally probably capped at 15,845 for both employees and owners, if they were capped, if you can bring back enough employees. You know, with it being a 60%, you know, it's an individual calculation that people need to make, but as long as you meet that, you could use the full amount for payroll, and we're seeing a lot of people do that. And you can do it for those maxes. It's just the only thing I would be considered is bringing back higher amounts per employee might affect bringing back everybody in total. Is there help for an owner who worked full-time in their business alone and is unable to go to the business and needs to hire an employee? I would check with America's Job Center. If you're in Kern County and you're needing some PPEs, that's a good opportunity to maybe you could go there and pick it up. But America's Job Center in Kern County, the employment training resource, and there's employer resources around everywhere that can actually assist you and might have some programs for actually helping you hire them back. Our PPP funds ran out this week. We were 2 people short of our 100% for forgiveness. Business drops off. We have to lay off employees again. Can we apply for forgiveness based on our highest FTE count we had in June? That is an excellent question, and not one that I think we have guidance to answer at this point. Hopefully there will be, it doesn't have to be at the end of your covered period when you elect to file for forgiveness. It is kind of aligning that way, but more guidance on this will determine that for us. The second question on this, if business picks up, you can go to 1231 and hire the 2 back in the next couple of months. How long do the 2 FTEs need to be on the payroll for forgiveness? Well, let's see, if you've extended, and see, that's another question that I think needs more guidance on. Because if you've actually extended it, you could actually apply for forgiveness even though you spent all the money maybe a month or 2 early, and you spent the money a month or 2 early, but you actually elect to close it after that time. So maybe like week 18 of the 24-week or week 16. So I believe it says you can, with the flexibility rule that came out, I believe that you can actually do that by filing at that later time. Is there an application form on the kerncounty.com website for the Kern County Recovers, or actually, excuse me, for the PPP program? And they provide a phone number and an email that is on the website. And what you need to do is either call them. So there's, so yes, the answer to your question is you can email them. What we'll do is we'll include that in the packet that's emailed out to you along with a couple of other documents, and you can see the full document. The full document is on their website under the PPE program. I just didn't, in the amount of time, put the email or the telephone number on here. Should have. Okay. Is the owner of an S company paid as an employee, or would it be the $46,000 max? And the answer to that is any business owner, sole proprietor, farmer, S corporation, C corporation, LLC, others, general partners, any business owner whatsoever. The rule came out, the maximum is $20,833. You can pay the 46K max to an employee, but any owner of the business, and that is an owner even if it's a different entity, is subject to the $20,833 max. Can I use EIDL to pay my business credit cards? You know, EIDL can be used for notes payable, for notes, and it can be used for working capital in the business, and I assume you use those bills for short-term expenses, maybe as a convenience. So my guess to that would be yes. I would probably want to ask SBA this question tomorrow if I were you, if you're looking to pay back any previous balance that was on the card before your EIDL went into effect. I am operating restaurants at 50% capacity. Does that help us as far as safe harbors? I would believe that definitely offers and hits the safe harbor, rings the safe harbor bell. Can you please go over the cap and go over in more detail S corporation ownership cap and what employer group health insurance payments can be applied to forgiveness? Well, S corporation owners, if you don't have employers, but it sounds like you do, you will be subject to the $20,833. If you have employers, they will be subjected to a higher amount. If you have an employer group health insurance program that was in force beforehand, it can actually be used also under as a payroll cost. We need more guidance to know if there's a workers' compensation that's covered under payroll. It does say select insurances. If there is an insurance, workers' comp would be one potentially that might. I really think that the definition of this and really where the guidance is going to go like if you have a term life insurance policy that you buy your employees or other types of insurance like that. But in my opinion, I don't have enough guidance to know if workers' comp is covered under payroll. A little water for the throat. Okay, I'm at work. I'm work sharing since March and my employers are at 50%. Are there hours, of these hours they do receive unemployment? I received the PPP 3 weeks ago and they're still at 50%. And our work doesn't warrant them returning full time yet. That's a good question. I am going to, would you please email me that question, Bearden, KBEARDEN @csub.edu, and let me look into that and we'll try to get you an answer later in the week. That is one that has not come up. Can you get a PPP loan if you have no employees before and now you do and are hiring for the first time? It was the business at 215 is the first question I would ask. And if you had no employees before, I don't think that it's going to change, but maybe some of the dates might change. I don't think anything's changing as far as the 5-week extension, if that gets passed into law. My gut feeling tells me no on this. You're hiring for the first time and now you're in that window, but there could be potentially a second round. Is there an application yet for Kern Recover's forgiveness loan? You would need to contact your lender on that. The lenders will help be doing the forgiveness part of it. So I'm taking it to believe that that's pretty impressive. In a short period of time, you've received, and this will be a great question for next week when our guest will be James Zervis, the chief operating officer for the County of Kern and architect of this program. So, okay, that is it on questions. We're done for today. Thank you again for joining us. We'll be back with more next week. We'll be back for number 17 in this series. Thank you for attending. Have a great week. Any other questions, send them to us. We'll get an email out to you with some of these attachments that we had talked about providing you. And have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.